Welcome to Behind the Tag. I'm your host, Julius Hallengren, and today my guest star is
Alex, aka Mrs. Figgies.
So Mrs. Figgies, what kind of things do you like to do? What kind of games do you like to play?
Oh man. Well, my favorite games involve rhythm. So I primarily play dance games. So like Dance Dance Revolution, Pump It Up, and In the Groove. Those are my three favorite dance games. I primarily play Pump It Up XX right now because we own a cabinet in my house. And so I play that, I would say, a few times a week. When the arcades were open, I would go play DDR. Arcades are closed, unfortunately, because of COVID. And then with In the Groove, I actually own a machine for In the Groove as well. We actually have it modified to run Stepmania, which is an open source build that allows us to add our own songs. So those three are what I focus on, but I do also play PC games. So I love horror games. I'm terrified of them, but I love them. And I also,
Really?
yeah, I tried Outlast 2 and I haven't touched it since because I was so scared. And then I also tried Resident Evil 7 and I'm still in the beginning. Still working on it. But I also downloaded a couple emulators, so I play like Nintendo 64 and Super
Nice.
Nintendo stuff. I love Banjo-Kazooie and I love Paper Mario. Those are like my two.
What systems have you played on?
So I still own all my old systems. I started on Super Nintendo. I still have it, still have the games. So that was like my first experience with gaming. We also owned a PlayStation 1 growing up, so I had exposure to like Final Fantasy 7. And I have my Nintendo 64, my PlayStation 2, I have a Dreamcast, I have a PlayStation 3, I have my original Game Boy, because I used to play that all the time, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, DS. I have a Nintendo Switch, like you name it, I've done it all. Yes, I have one of those. I still have mine. So I haven't touched it in years, obviously, but I do have like all of those collected. Yes, yeah, emulators. So super awesome to be able to play old games, and they're free. And you can connect it to, well, if you have the casting ability, you can cast it from your PC to a TV if it's like a smart TV. So essentially, like you just have to grab an Xbox controller, wireless Xbox controller, cast it. You could sit on the couch and play it like like it's just like in the old days when we used to just have the the system set up. And yeah, it's totally fun. And I've done that when I've had friends over so they can be in on it too, and it's so much fun.
So you were saying that you like to play on an Xbox controller, or is that just your preference, or is that just what you have?
That's just what I have. It's actually my husband's. I don't have my own, unfortunately, but he lets me use it, which is nice. So I cannot play PC games with PC controls. I've tried. I can't. So I like to play with an Xbox controller because I like the controller feel. I like the console feel. So I'll usually do that. Even with like Resident Evil and Outlast and all those horror games that I mentioned earlier, I use the controller.
Do you find any like lag in the controls or anything like that, or is it pretty smooth for you?
It's pretty smooth. It's not 100% perfect, but it does the job. If I'm on my PC and I play with my PC, I keep it plugged in just because Bluetooth can kind of be, yeah.
I do the same thing with a PlayStation 4 controller.
Oh, really? Can
So
you connect that to, you can
mhm.
connect it to a PC? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I never owned a PS4. So never
I n-
experienced.
I never bought a PS4. My younger brother
Yeah.
bought the Pro and then gave me his original one. Just like here, just play these games. I was like, all right, bro. But yeah, I've been last night I was playing Halo on my computer with a PlayStation 4
Nice.
controller, which is probably the weirdest thing I've ever said about video games.
I do have to say the PlayStation controllers, I like them a little bit more than the Xbox controllers. I don't know if it's just like the feel of it or whatever, but I never grew up with an Xbox. I never cared for Xbox. So I was always a PlayStation person. So it's just easier to use the PlayStation controller for me. So now that I know that, might have to invest in one.
Yeah, key mapping's pretty easy with it too. Like
Yeah,
it's pretty much set up to just
plug and play.
for the most part.
Yeah, that's same with the
It's
It's so easy now. I literally one day was like, I want to play N64 games. I miss playing N64 games and I don't want to grab my N64. So I like searched. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Download. Oh, where do I get ROMs? Website, all the ROMs, downloaded a couple. And then when it came to using an Xbox controller, if you want to use Bluetooth, there was like something extra I had to download, but I found a YouTube video that explained it and it was super easy. And the key map, so the key mapping was like super, super easy. It's not 100% perfect either. There are some, I would say, UI issues with it that I'm like, or UX issues with it that I'm like, could be better, but at the same time, like it still allows me to play the game, and that's really why I downloaded it in the first place. So
I have a Nintendo Switch and it has like the whole Nintendo Online where you get the
yeah.
NES and the SNES on.
Mhm.
I am just dying for him to put a 64 on there so
Oh,
bad.
right. Oh my gosh. I'm actually waiting for them to remaster Banjo Kazooie. I could feel it coming. I could feel it happening, and I'm just
Right?
waiting for that. That would be the ultimate, like, I would just make that would make my year, whatever year that happens. I would be so excited because I grew up playing Banjo Kazooie, and I'm surprised how many people actually haven't played it. It's a very good game, very, like, I would say, underrated. In
I will have to admit this. I never owned the game, but I've beaten the
Really,
game because I had a buddy
it's
that
a
let me
good
borrow it.
game. It's such a good game. Like I played the second one before the first one. I had Banjo Tooie, and I was like, this is really cool. And then I was like, there's a first one. Why am I playing this? I don't even remember why I got Banjo Tooie in the first place. I was young. I was like, when did it come out? Like 2000 or something. I was like 11 or something like that. And I think I just picked it out because it looked fun. It's my type of game. I was like RPGs at that time. So I bought it and then I was like, oh, there's the first one. So yeah, it's weird. And to this day, it's one of my favorite games.
So you like those platformer games, huh?
Yeah. I grew up on Mario. I was hardcore Mario. Yoshi's Island for Super Nintendo is my favorite Super Nintendo game.
Really?
Yes. Mhm. Loved it. I even played Mario Paint. Mario Paint for Super Nintendo was like it the first thing you would see is like the paint window and you can like paint whatever you want, and then they had like other things included in it, and one of the things that stood out to me was there's a composer, and so you can actually compose music with like the little they had like the little different icons, and they each made a different sound, and they gave you like a staff, and you could it was obviously pretty simple. It was the key of C, so it's like you can't use like sharps and flats or anything. You can just, but you can like make you can make chords, so you can have up to 3 in one like beat, so you can do some like, it was really cool. And then they ended up making a PC version where you can actually have more than just one octave. You can have like, I think it was like 2 or 3 octaves. You can have more in the chords. You can have sharps and flats. You could do all these cool things and compose music with like Mario sounds. Like it's really innovative, and I had so much fun with that. Because I have a background in music, so for me it was like, this is so awesome. But it's like I could care less about the actual painting. I cared more about the music side of it. But I loved that game. It was so much fun. I still have it somewhere. It even came with a little like mouse. So instead of like an actual Super Nintendo controller, they made a mouse that looks like a computer mouse that you would use so you can like draw. It was
Huh.
really cool. I have it somewhere. I wish I could find it right now and show you, but it's pretty awesome. Definitely have to look it up.
What was your background in music?
So when I was around 9 years old, I started to learn the flute, and in school, everyone played an instrument kind of thing. But I just loved it. I remember I started a year later than a lot of the other kids. So I was like trying to catch up to where some of them were. So I was like, I'm going to learn like everything. And I was like teaching myself, like going through the practice book. And I just loved it. And so I played the flute all the way through my first year of college. I was actually a music major for a year. And I did AP music theory in high school. In high school, I taught myself piano, guitar, bass guitar, a little bit of saxophone. And then I also played piccolo, because when you play flute, chances are you're going to end up playing piccolo. But I did marching band. I did concert band. I did wind ensemble. So yeah, I ended up dropping my music major, unfortunately, but it was more so I didn't want to turn something that I loved as a hobby into a career, because I felt like school and everything took that passion away, because there was always like some sort of like, you need to do this and you need to do that. And it was like, well, I want to do what like I want to enjoy, I guess. And I ended up just kind of stopping with that. But once in a while, I'll pick up my flute. It's very rare, but like all that music theory knowledge comes in handy, especially when it comes to like dance games and understanding timing and like different note values and stuff, like or time signatures and that sort of thing. So rhythms are not an issue for me in dance games. I see it like it's music. So do you know much about In the Groove and what happened with it?
No,
Okay,
not at all.
little story time. I mean,
Perfect.
there's
I
a
love
back.
stories.
Yeah. So there's a whole thing within the groove. So as you can see, I've got the banner. When I bought my machine, this is the banner that came in it. So In the Groove was something that was created. Kyle Ward is the mastermind behind In the Groove. He came out with the second one. And it was like an original game. It had its own music. And Konami came along and was like, you're basically stealing something that's ours, because we have a patent for like dance. And I guess dance games, it's more of like an arrow hitting the top of the screen. So it's like a weird specific patent. And so they sued In the Groove. They gave him like a cease and desist letter. And so now Konami technically owns In the Groove. This was back in like 2006. But right before they took over In the Groove themselves, and they never did anything else with it, by the way. Kyle and the team released a patch, and it allows you to put custom songs. Now, back in the day, like it wasn't very simple to be like, hey, I'm just going to use custom songs or whatever. Like you could put your own USB, like you put songs on your USB profile, because when you put a USB stick into the machine, it'll create a profile for you. You could actually add songs in there and play them. Now, Stepmania at the time was just this like very similar thing to In the Groove, open source. You can put your own songs in there. It was the same concept of how In the Groove worked. And so those songs you could put on that USB, put them in the machine, whatever. If you were a little bit more like tech savvy with it, like people figured out how to actually get into the machine because it runs Linux. And so if you're familiar with Linux, you can figure out how to get past the BIOS, boot from like you had to have like a USB stick that ran Slacks, which is like, I forget what it has something to do with Linux. I don't know the exact like terminology for it, but I used to do this all the time at a public arcade. I would plug it in, boot priority that stick. You'd be able to go inside the actual like I guess the hard
game
drive and
cabinet
the
or
CPU. Yeah. Well, yeah, you can see all of the different partitions, and then you can physically transfer those songs onto the machine so you can play them. So that became this huge thing in the community where like we can play custom songs. But obviously it's not very like it's not something that like round one would be allowed to have an In the Groove machine because there was custom songs and there was a lot of liability with that. So they would never have something like that. But as time went on, people got smarter and smarter with like how to utilize the hardware with software. And so you would see these people building PCs running Stepmania, like the newest version of Stepmania. And the changes and the improvements they made on it are so incredible. There's so much data you can get from it. And they would just run that on their cabinets, and that's exactly how we do it these days. And that's what our machine's like. We have a PC build in the back. We took out the CRT. We put our own LCD screen. So we have a Wells Gardner mounted on the cabinet, so we're able to play it like with like a upgraded hardware. And these days everyone's upgrading their hardware because that hardware is like what, 15 years old. It eventually dies on you, and it died on us a long time ago. And so it's this whole community is basically like they make step charts and they have tournaments, and you know there's different things like tech, like where you have to try and time like really difficult patterns, or there's stamina where you're going for a really long time, foot speed where you're just going really fast. Like there's this whole thing. It just opens up this whole door. But yeah, so when it comes to In the Groove and it comes to like knowing like music and having that musical background, you know, if say I were to make step charts, having that musical background, I'm able to figure out the note values for a step chart based off the song. Like I can hear a song and be like, oh, that's a 16th note, or that's an 8th note, and this would go well with that. And a lot of people that make step charts, some of them don't even have a musical background, but they learn these basics of music theory, and they're able to create these like crazy step charts and everything. But it's really interesting. It's really I enjoy it, and I think it's really cool. And the more you do it, like a lot of people have figured out how to sync the song properly, so there's no need to worry about adjusting to the timing of it, because a lot of like especially like the well-known step artists, they do a really good job of making sure that it's easily playable for yeah, if we want. And here's the thing, if you want standardization where it's like, okay, I want to be able to have something more standardized, that's where DDR comes in and pump it up, because these games are still currently being updated, and new games are coming out for those two specific dance games by Konami and Andamiro. So they have official music, they have official hardware, they have official software, and you can't customize that. But that's why In the Groove is so like popular. It's because when people are like, oh, I want to play this custom stuff, they have that option, and then they can go over to the arcade and play Pump or DDR to get that, you know, like official feel of a dance game. So DDR and In the Groove are both up, down, left, right. So they're 4 panels, simple up, down, left, right. that's part of the reason why In the Groove was like too similar to DDR, and Konami was like, no, that's ours, you know. So but if you look at like modern day DDR and modern day In the Groove, the way that your scoring is, like the scoring is completely different. In the Groove does a percentage base, so 100% is perfect, like 100, like we call it a quad because it's a quad star. In DDR, if you get the maximum points you can get for a song is 1 million. If you get 1 million, we call it marvelous full combo. And if you break down each of the different, what are they called? So the timing windows of each are completely different. So if you hit a fantastic, because a quad is a full fantastic combo. That means every single step you hit was within a certain timing window. And for In the Groove, it's not as tight as DDR. So it's actually harder to get a marvelous full combo than it is to get a quad, just based off of how tight the timing has to be, if that makes sense. And then with Pump is completely different because you've got the corners and then the center. So it's 5 panel. And you don't have to worry about up, down, left, right, because you've got upper corner, lower corner, center. And it's actually, so DDR is Japanese, Pump It Up is Korean, and Amiro makes Pump It Up, and Konami makes DDR. So you have a difference in music. So the licensing for songs is different. Pump It Up has a wider timing window, so it's actually easier to be within the perfect window. So if you want to get a perfect combo, it's subjectively, I would say it's subjectively easier, because the whole point of Pump It Up is not actually to time it, it's actually to combo. So you don't want to break your combo in Pump. DDR and ITG will not penalize you as much if you were to break your combo, because of the way that their timing or their scoring system is. But Pump, it's like a different, you have to treat it like a different game. And if you go from 4 panel to 5 panel, as we say, it's a pretty hard transition. People think it's a lot easier if they have a background in dance games, but it really isn't, because you have to relearn a whole new game and learn different technique, you have to change your mindset on how you play the game. So they are vastly different. Like once you get used to it, it's a lot easier to go from game to game. But like if you're starting out with another game coming from one of the other ones, and it's like, it's completely different. Took me a while to get adjusted to it. But now I'm fine with it. But in the beginning, oh man, it was like learning how to ride a bike. Like a whole new thing.
Oh, good Lord. I don't know how you do it. I mean, I'm not physically coordinated enough to be able to I can barely do DDR. I can barely do DDR. There was a point where I was playing DDR, oh my goodness, at least 2-3 times a day playing, and I couldn't get past like medium. Like
it's horrible. A lot of time and dedication. For context, I've been playing dance games since 2003, and I started on DDR. That was my first game. Went to a Best Buy. There was the PS2 setup. I was like, what is this? This looks fun. My friend was like, I have this at home. I was like, all right, cool. We hooked. So I spent so much of my time, because I started it right before I went into high school. I spent so much time at the arcades, and it's a lot of dedication. But if you know people like that play the game, very, very, very helpful. And I like to pass that along too, because I've had a lot of people, as I've progressed in the dance game world, I would say, I've had people help me out. So I like to pass on my knowledge and help out others. and, you know, help them get better. So fortunately, there's a lot of people that are willing to help newer players, and having that support, you'd be surprised like where you could actually go with these dance games. Like I would never see myself where I'm at now back like in 2003, you know?
Probably like a tip that you'd usually give a first time player like that hasn't really done a whole lot, like they played a few games on it and they're getting used to it and they're getting better, but what's something to be able to step up their game?
I would say, well, usually first timers tend to, I always notice this, they tend to do the whole like foot shuffle where they go back to the center. Like they'll be like, oh, up, back to the center, down, back to the center. You don't have to do that. You can actually go up and leave your foot there to hit the down arrow. So like that's an example of like a pattern. So it's like, oh, I have to hit up. You don't have to put your foot back to hit down. Like you have 2 feet. And so if you're alternating each foot for each note, you're gonna be okay. And it also helps you so that you're minimizing effort, because in the end, like as you get into higher levels, you're gonna want to minimize your effort. But that's one technique thing, like a technique tip that I have for newer players. But usually it's enjoy the game, have fun with it. It's still a game, and remember why you're playing it in the first place. You don't have to worry about all these like really good players. They've been playing for years usually, but sometimes it can be intimidating to talk to those types of players, but most of the time they're very friendly, they're very helpful, and they're more than willing to help with like anything, any questions, any tips, all of that. So with the settings, this is when I say that Stepmania specifically is very like it's come a long way. The types of settings that it has is just incredible. One of the things that most players will fix first is the speed. So the default speed on these games is super slow. So all of the notes are like really compact and you can't really read it that well. And so what happens when you increase the speed, what it does is it makes it so that the notes are more spread out and you can read them much easier. That is something that DDR didn't used to have back in like the early 2000s. That wasn't something that existed. And other things that you can change the note skin. If you have a preference for note skin color or like size, you can change like if you want the background there or not. A lot of the times backgrounds are very distracting. So having a turning off the background makes it so that you can see the notes easier. There's an in the groove, you can turn off like mines, which are those little like explosive bombs that if you hit them, they'll actually hurt your score. Sometimes people just don't want to worry about those. They just want to enjoy the notes of the chart. So they'll turn them off to avoid having that happen. What other cool things?
I
There's
didn't
a
even
lot
know
of
that
different
was
things.
a thing.
Yeah, you can do a lot. These days with Stepmania, you can actually show your step statistics right on the gameplay. So you'll have, if you're playing one player, you'll have your notes on one side of the screen, wherever you're playing like you normally would. The second half of the screen, it'll show you your statistics for the song as you're playing it. So you can see, oh, I've had all fantastics so far, or oh, I've had some excellence. Like you could see like your breakdown of steps and how you were hitting it. You can see the progress bar of the song to see the density, because they actually can show that now of like, oh, here's a graph of like how the step chart is. And so over in this section, you're going to see it's like really intense. So it's going to be a really hard section. So you can actually prepare yourself mentally for what's to come in that step chart if you've never seen it before, or if you do know it and you're like, oh, I don't remember where this is. Like it's so detailed. It is so detailed. But those are like some things you can actually change in the settings.
God,
and add.
it's like baseball statistics where people are trying to figure out like, oh, if this guy just gets on base, he always scores. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But like I said, like having a community that works on this over the years, like they can come up with some pretty crazy things. I know with DDR, it's not as extensive in terms of settings, but you can still change the note skin, change the speed. You can add some fun little like things like there's one that's called stealth where you can't see the notes as they go up. You just know when they like you have to know when to hit them, so it's like almost like invisible notes, and there's some people that like to mess around with that. Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh my God. How do you even play that?
Some people like a challenge. I've seen people put it on stealth and they have to memorize the chart to be able to play it on stealth, and then they'll get like an like I've seen 2 people now that have gotten MFCs on stealth, which is insane. MFCs are not that easy to get, so
Good Lord.
yeah.
Oh, how's your chart memorization?
Zero. Zero. Typically with songs, I won't memorize songs or charts. That's kind of hard. There are some people that probably do that, but you can study charts, which is what I do on YouTube. So if there's a song that's difficult and I'm like, I can't seem to get my steps right in this section, I can go to YouTube because most of the time, these charts, especially for Pump It Up and Dance Dance Revolution, there are people in the community that upload every single chart for every single song in the current mixes. And you can slow it down and you can actually study the arrows to understand how you need to be like either turning or stepping. And what I'll do is I'll slow it down to like 50%. I'll step on my dance pad and I'll watch it and I'll go through it and keep repeating that to get the steps. And then I can go in the game and play it. And it's like you're practicing, like, just like anything else, like you have to practice.
You're getting the muscle memory.
Yeah. So it's not so much memorizing, but it's understanding how your body's supposed to move and hit the notes.
Thank you, gamers, for joining us for this conversation. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe so you can see more of this interview and others like it. Have a good one, you guys.